everybody. This is not an official episode. I just want to jump in and answer some of the questions and comments that came in recently in the last couple episodes. Thank you for all of the amazing, thoughtful, wonderful questions and comments. You get to see sort of the scruffy version of me. It's been a lot going on lately. Yeah, I just haven't had time to shave. I've missed that part. Yeah, I've been running around a little bit. Mom was doing a bunch of shows. She did a run of solo shows, and so I ended up jumping out, and Say and I were running around with her. Had a good time watching Mama do some shows again. Super cool, but it got pretty busy. But I'm back home, and here we go. I want to answer some stuff. So. I'm just going to start marching through. These are, I'm not sure if they're in any particular order. I just sort of copy stuff out of the YouTube comments and put them up here so I can answer them. So here is some stuff. I'm sorry if I missed it, but this is Sebastian Tomita. I'm sorry if I missed it, but have you talked about making the VPR bass traps yet? I have not done that yet. It is coming. And in glorious detail as well. So I show the whole process of doing a round of assembling one and putting it on the wall and the whole thing. And I don't know if these are actually specifically the VPR thing. There's some different versions of this. I don't know exactly what this version is called, if it is in fact that or not or whatever, but all of those details and what is unique about these, you'll be able to see in that episode. It is coming. I don't know exactly when I'll get there, but I know I recorded it, and there's I think some really useful stuff there. Actually, tomorrow I'm going to be doing another whole round of more acoustic tweaking in this room. I'm getting super close, but you know, it's always that last 5 or 10% that's the hardest to get, and that's what I'm chasing right now. So you haven't missed it. It's coming. Okay, then I've got Guitar God 666able. Can you explain how and what you use to all the guitar modulation effects on the T-Ride stuff? Let's see. Modulation. So, you know, I did the Zombies from Hell episode, and I don't know if you're talking about the gating effect, because I demonstrate that, you know, in detail in that episode. You can really see what the gating thing, which was really sort of like, you know, the sort of leading characteristic or the hallmark of the T-Ride guitar sound was that gating effect. But there is some modulation stuff in there, and what I remember, primarily the two main things that were used, if there was modulation stuff going on, was this old ADA flanger, just the regular, that you know, guitar pedal flanger ADA. It's like it's got sort of like red trim and a silver face on it. ADA flanger, and this Dunlop Rotovibe pedal, one of the very first ones that they came out with. This, you know, was supposed to be like a recreation of the original Univibe pedal, and so we used that on a bunch of stuff. So that's like the modulation effect that you hear on Backdoor Romeo, which is a gated guitar played with a violin bow with Rotovibe on it, you know. So if you're hearing modulation, it's most likely going to be Dunlop Rotovibe or ADA flanger. There you go. So then, Richie McCourt, hey, Eric, did you consider checking out the Trinnov ST2 Pro for room correction? So, and I think another person actually noticed it sitting in the room. I have checked it out and I have used it. It was a part of my setup in Topanga, and it is really incredible what that thing does. There's some just unbelievable voodoo going on in there. And you know, it takes some already really wonderful sounding speakers, because I actually had them on my near-field Strauss monitors, which I think already sound pretty spectacular, and just took them to a whole other level of just depth, and did really cool things with the imaging, and they were just really, it's a really incredible thing. My only thing that I'm trying to figure out with that is the latency, and ironically, or coincidentally, they were just emailing me recently asking about where I'm at with it, and so in my new setup, I'm trying to get there with the large Strauss monitors without the Trinnov system. Not even necessarily because it, you know, doesn't sound great. It really sounds incredible, but I found that I had to be, you know, turning the system on and off, because I do a lot of recording of performances in the control room, and you know, the combined latency of whatever little bit there might be in the computer plus more latency added with the monitoring system, it got too crazy for me. So so I'm trying to get that control room set up where I won't have to be dealing with any additional latency. It's already kind of an issue for me with the computer. I grew up making records where the sound makes it back out the speakers at the speed of light, and it's still sort of disorienting to me to have that latency in there. And so, but there is also going to be an additional room at this new setup for doing editing, mixing, and I might actually set that room up to be Atmos. But I think I'm going to use the Trinnov system in that room. So it will make sense in there. I'm not going to have as much space to work with for doing a bunch of detailed acoustic treatment. And so, you know, that is the amazing, you know, cure-all if your room really isn't doing what you need it to. So I'm familiar with it. I love it. And I'm still figuring out the best, you know, application for it in my new world here. So then Adam Gallant asked, thank you for this. For the mix tweaks, when you moved to the basement to the studio room, moved from the basement to the studio room, what speakers did you use? I went back to the smaller near field Strauss monitors with a pair of subs. I use these Subwoofer Pros, and I have in this setup here, I ended up not using a crossover. They added up cool. I just split the output, and so the same signal goes to the subs. The subs have, you know, a low pass on them anyway, so they paired up well that way. So that was what I used in my upstairs setup. Then okay, one question. Oh, the vocal saturation. So this is a question about this new Nickel Creek stuff. Was the vocal saturation on where the long line leads mostly courtesy of the RCA console preamp, or was there some extra post-processing happening later to bring more of that character on? Okay, so yeah, definitely the RCA was contributing to that a little bit. So that one, what ended up happening was, you know, we had a vocal track that we'd done that day, and then we came back later and did some punches, and I've been doing this thing where, you know, I have like just the raw preamp captured into the computer, and then I also have a processed version of it. And so after we finalized all of, you know, the few punches that we did and stuff, and got the take that we really wanted, and everything was ready to be mixed, then I did sort of like a pre-mix treatment of it, where it went through the RCA preamp and a tape machine. So we were back here, and so I put it through that little, that one, it was the Ampex 354. And so most of the distortion that you're hearing on that is that Ampex tape machine. Man, just it saturates beautifully. You know, you hear that sound on so many old recordings, all these amazing old, you know, whatever it is, like Elvis Presley and Little Richard and all those old recordings where you hear everything just sort of like getting maxed out. A lot of it is that Ampex tape, you know, those old tape machines. So then we have, I'd love to learn more about the Helmholtz port end correction values. I feel like I've have them. Okay, so I'm going to do a whole thing on this. I finally, I think maybe I already said this, but I finally had like a successful Helmholtz moment. Oh boy, it was so complicated, very elusive, those Helmholtzes. But the end, I had the same thing with this end correction thing. I searched endlessly on the internet, like, because there was a really great Helmholtz calculator that was set up on a web page on that works really well, but then it had this end correction thing, and I'm like, what am I supposed to put in here? I searched around. I said there was one person that actually shared the value that they used. I put it in, did nothing. It made no sense with what I was doing, and so what I ended up doing was finding my own end correction value. And I think once you figure out a combination of what you're going to be, the materials that you're using, you have to actually build one. And measure what the resonance is. And the way I did this was, I was using concrete forming tubes that you get at Home Depot. I think somebody saw those in one of the videos. And so it's cool because they make them so you can actually fit them into each other, so you can easily slide them in and out, and it's a tight enough fit that it seals up good enough where you can just adjust the length of it and change the volume of the resonant chamber by just extending or shortening it, and then you put a port on there, so I seal up one side and the other side has a hole cut in it. And obviously the size of the hole, changes the resonant frequency as well. But what I did was, I built one based on a calculation. So I put in the dimensions of this tube and put a specific size porthole in there that should give me a particular resonance. And then I measured it. And what I did was I took just a single ply of a single panel of toilet paper and taped it over the porthole. And so in this case, this thing was supposed to resonate somewhere around 50 hertz. And I put it right in front of one of the large Strauss monitors. And so the low frequency driver was shooting right across the face of this port. So the port was actually looking this way. So I guess, the port was sort of perpendicular to the signal coming out of the speaker. And as soon as I'd started sweeping around the frequency, and as soon as I hit the resonance of that thing, the toilet paper goes crazy, and then you can really see what frequency you're actually getting. And so that informed me, so like the calculation based on the volume of the Helmholtz chamber would give me a particular frequency. And when I measured it, that frequency was different than what it was because of I needed an end correction value, and then I just put in an end correction value that got me to the frequency that I measured. And once I had that end correction value, whenever I started making changes, it all tracked and it all made sense. So I had to figure out my own end correction value, and that was how I ended up doing it. So I don't know, hopefully that helps. But again, there's going to be a whole thing on this where you can actually see it and see the whole process and whatever, and how it ultimately ended up helping things. So then what was okay, maybe I missed it, but what was the impetus for the move from California to Vermont? Oh boy, that's a big one. It's a lot of things. It probably primarily starts with family. We're raising a human being, and I really believe that kids were really, like human beings in general, socially, were designed to be, brought up in a larger group of people. And in Southern California, Grace and I don't really have any of our extended family close by, and so in Vermont we have grandparents and uncles and cousins and all kinds of stuff close by, right in the same area, just minutes apart. And so there's just more people in his life, more people for him to bounce off of. We had been coming to Vermont just to visit with her family, and then I just really fell in love with the whole culture in this specific area here, the central Vermont, this Mad River Valley area. It's just an amazing community of people. So I really love that. I think it's a really great place to learn how to be, when you're developing as a human being. I've got a 5-year-old son that's deep in that process, and I think it's a really great place to learn how to be just a sane, healthy, happy human being. And so that's really, my sort of number one priority, in the decision making right now. So that was a huge part of it. And then, I think when this property became available to purchase, we just, Grace and I are kind of real estate junkies. We just look at Zillow. It's like looking at porn for us. So when we saw this property and I saw the whole arrangement of it, all of these really characteristic things that I'd been kind of dreaming about my whole life, you know. Los Angeles was a really, really incredible place to be when I was really on the chase to make records, and was just 100% focused on that. The resources there are amazing. You're right in the middle of all these other, you know, like super, super top level, incredibly talented people that are in the music business. And it's just an inspiring place to be when you're really, really on that chase. And so my time there was really incredible for that reason. But probably, if I'm honest, not a place I would choose to live, or particularly not a place I would choose to raise a child. I think it's a little more challenging figuring out how to be a, you know, sane, healthy, happy human being in Los Angeles. And so I think I've always pictured myself ending up in a place like this, where there's a little more space. There's water on this property. There's a river that runs through this property. There's just beautiful mountains and meadows, and you know, and then when you have the addition of, like, there's this amazing barn structure that could be converted into this incredible creative workspace like nothing I've ever had before. You know, for me, it was like, wow, this is the dream I've been looking for. You know, I think I was always imagining ending up in a place like this. I just didn't know it was going to be in Vermont. You know, in something like this, you know, we have a place in Topanga that is, you know, not even half an acre of space. And, you know, this property in Vermont is like 120 acres. And the place in Topanga cost 3 times what the property here in Vermont costs. So there's like, I couldn't do this in California just because of the, you know, just the pricing of the real estate there. There's really, you know, I don't have that money. So that's just the reality of it. But I can do it here, you know. And so that was exciting to me. It's like, wow, this dream could really happen here. And it is, you know, so. So I'm sure there's probably more to it than that, but you know, those were sort of the main things, you know, in the moment, leading up to it, and really getting excited about it and diving in to do it, you know. So then we have Eric, really enjoying a new series. I don't know, wondering if you could do a video on guitar and amp grounding hum buzz solutions. It's a rabbit hole I spent more time on than I like to admit. Yeah, yeah, that's a great suggestion. I'll definitely do that. I don't know if I'll offer anything you haven't already tried, but there are some good tricks to that. I've gone very far in a lot of different directions, you know. Probably the most useful of which now is sort of been captured in the GB Tracker thing. That is all transformer isolated grounding in there, and that makes a huge difference. And one of the things that I've noticed with some of the other DIs and reamps that are out in the market is they get the transformer isolation right, but they don't get the shielding of the transformer right. And so you can isolate to avoid ground loops, but then the device itself ends up picking up hums on its own, you know, because it's not shielded properly. So fortunately, I have the brain of Larry Jasper in my corner, and he is incredibly brilliant with that stuff. And so, you know, he really, really got it right on that device. So that's an amazing tool for eliminating that stuff. So I've done it that way. I've done it all the way. I've built a Faraday cage, you know, for people to play in, and done it that way. So I'll find a time to do an episode on that. I think that should be a fun one to do. Okay. Okay, this is a question about a Trix microphone based on the Reslow VMC microphone. I have one of those Reslows. They're cool. I haven't heard of the Trix version, but I'm sure it's a cool one as well. According to Chris Johnson, Sylvia Massey's engineer, try to help me. The mic has 2 pins on the back that I assume is where the mic cable once plugged into. I have no idea how to get it working. Okay, I have a bunch of funky old microphones like this, including a Reslow, and I still remember the Reslow maybe balanced coming out of it, but it sounds like this is an unbalanced signal coming out. And the thing that's worked the best for me, this is the thing to try, you can take any old coax cable. So if you only have 2 connections, that means that it's unbalanced. One of those pins is the hot or the actual signal of the microphone, and the other one is for grounding and shield. And so you can take just a regular old guitar cable, cut off the connector on one end, and take those two bare wires and try them each way. There's only two ways it can go. One way, if you get it right, and the hot signal is actually going to the tip of the connector at the other quarter-inch connector at the other end, then you'll hear the microphone signal. If you get it backwards, you'll hear just a bunch of buzz. And so then take that quarter-inch cable and plug it into a DI. And then put the DI into a mic preamp, and then you'll probably really hear a good version of what this microphone has to offer. So see if that works for you. Okay, what has been the biggest unexpected adjustment for you in moving from California to Vermont? Also, are you still planning on doing those in-person masterclass type seminars? Okay, biggest or unexpected adjustment. Overall, I just love it. It really hasn't been a whole lot of an adjustment for me. Like, being here in Vermont is much more novel for me. Like, everything is kind of new, a new experience. In California, the seasonal changes are much more subtle, obviously very dramatic here in Vermont. But I'm enjoying the snow. There's snow everywhere right now on the ground. It's beautiful. I love it. The cold doesn't really bother me. I think I'm more adverse to when things are too hot, because there's only so much clothes you can take off, and if you're still hot, that's it. You're just screwed. But here, even when it gets really cold, like, if you have the right gear, you're fine. You're not going to feel it at all. I recently got heated gloves. Boy, that was kind of a game changer. Love that. And then here was the one thing that I wasn't really that tuned into, being this far north on the planet. The difference in the length of the day between seasons is extremely dramatic. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a 5 or 6 hour difference in the length of the day between winter and summer solstice. I mean, that is a huge difference. And I wasn't fully aware of that. I mean, I knew that there was a general concept that, like, that it changes more, when you go further north. Planets tilted, I get that. But I didn't know it was that much. 5 or 6 hours. It's a lot. It's very, very noticeable. So that was something that was kind of unexpected. And then, yes, I am planning on doing the in-person masterclass, retreat things here at this place. It's the place is still being finished. And I'm actually starting to map it out. It's a 5-day retreat, mapping out exactly what the classes are going to be each day and how the whole thing's going to go. I'll when I get closer to it, I'll be able to reveal more about that. I'm hoping the first one will be this year, if I can get it together, and sort of late summer, maybe end of August, early September, something like that. Would potentially be the first one. But there'll be plenty of notice, and I'll give tons of information about what the vision is for that, and share it with everybody, see if anybody's into doing that. But yeah, I would love to do it. I'm working hard towards it. Okay, non-gear related, kind of wanted to ask for a long time. Would you consider having a manager in the music business as helpful, necessary? What role did your manager play in your career? I've had a manager, and I have a somewhat unique situation where my manager and my lawyer are the same person. Started off as my lawyer, and then he was essentially managing me, and then said, "Hey, I should be your manager too." And I'm actually the only person that he ever managed, as far as I know. That's what he said for a long time. Maybe it changed more recently, but. It made a huge difference for me. And it wasn't so much in him, like, aggressively going out and chasing down great gigs for me to get and stuff like that. For me, once the transition happened where I had some visible records out there, I was just super lucky and happened to do demos with Smash Mouth and Third Eye Blind, and then ended up making records with them, and they did well, and that just sort of was the launch point for everything. And then it had a certain momentum to it where there was just, you know, a steady flow of people that were interested in having me make their records. So I really didn't have to chase projects. So it wasn't as much as that. But I think the thing that is really, really useful is having a whole separate person deal with the money part of it, and for a couple of reasons for me. The main one is just so I don't have to engage in that dialogue with an artist that I'm trying to cultivate, you know, a very close, trusting, creative relationship with. Money can be complicated to talk about. I'm very comfortable talking about money. I've always tried to make it very easy whenever I have had to do that. Just like, hey, whatever, it's money. Well, you know, we all want to do well, and I want to do well, you want to do well. Let's figure out what works for both of us. Whatever, no big deal. But still, sometimes it's awkward and difficult, and it can really fuck up your, you know, your trust and creative relationship with an artist. So I think there's a lot of value in that. And then the other thing that he really did for me, and he just did it again, is that I just would have never had the balls ever in my life to ask for the amount of money that he asked for on my behalf. Like, I just could have never done it with a straight face. And, you know, who knows if it was really justified or not, but, you know, there were other people out there making records in those same time frames that were getting, you know, I'm sure, similar amounts. And so I guess it was sort of standard to some degree. I'm sure there's people that got more. But, you know, like, I'm just not that guy. I would have never even thought to ask for it, you know? And so I think that's really, really valuable, having somebody that can, you know, just really advocate for you and say, you know, and ask those crazy questions like, you know, whatever. If you want to hire Eric Valentine, it costs you $500,000, you know, like, I would have never, ever done that, you know? It was nuts. And so I was very grateful for that. And he's just been, you know, just an incredible source of great objective advice. He's just a brilliant guy. He's incredibly knowledgeable in the music business, and there's been a lot of really important times where, you know, I've really sought out his advice about potentially what project to do, and other, you know, what things to focus on. And he's just, you know, he's just been a great person to have feedback from. So it's been hugely useful for me. You know, I pay him a percentage, and man, I'm, you know, happy to pay him every penny of that percentage. Like, you know, I would have never had the career that I had, or at least would have never been able to monetize my career the way that it had been without his help, for sure. I'm super grateful for it, and he's just a lovely guy and dear friend. So, so it was really useful for me. You know, now there's not a whole lot to manage. You know, I'm just not that active making records anymore. So, but I still consider him my manager and still love having him a part of my whatever it is that I'm screwing around doing. So, yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Those are my thoughts about it. I think there's probably some managers out there, if you're really trying to like get some traction and make that pivotal connection with an artist that's going to sort of be your sort of breakout moment, a manager could be really, really helpful for that. You know, my circumstances didn't really require that. I was just super lucky, but I think it could really make a big difference, you know. Okay, just wondering if you could tell us some more about the room that you're in for chatting parts of the videos. Okay, so I'm assuming this room right here. This is a bedroom in this farmhouse that we live in Vermont. And I put up some Acoustimac, you know, what they call bass traps. You know, I'm going to talk about this more in the future. They're not bass traps. You know, and just kind of set it up quickly to be as listenable as possible. You know, they're not in here now because they're now all over in the barn, but I also had a bazillion, you know, I brought a bunch of tube traps with me from Vermont. You wouldn't even really be seeing it because they were mostly all in the front of the room. But this has been my control room, you know. It was just sort of another one of the endless, you know, parade of makeshift temporary control rooms that I've been subjecting myself to during this very, very long transition, you know, out of barefoot recording and into this new place that I'm still building. I was there today, finished building my tech bench today. I was very satisfied with that. It's beautiful. So yeah, so it's just a bedroom, you know, in our house that I've tried to treat and make it sound good. Okay, thanks so much for all the videos. What actually contributes most to a recording sounding good? From what I've gathered from mentors, it seems like you could rank the different elements of recording in order of importance, like this: performer, room, instrument, mic, preamp, etc. Given all your experience, I'm curious what you have to say about which elements are most important in capturing as much musicality in a recording as possible, whether it be different tools available, even the mood in the room during the time. Thanks so much. Yeah, it's a good question. So you're specific. This is interesting because like you're specifically centering on the recording sounding good. So not even necessarily the best song, you know, but so we're really talking about a great sounding recording, which is to me is different than having an overall sort of extraordinary musical experience, because I would prioritize that a little different. But if we're just talking about the recording sounding good, and the stuff that you listed here, certainly these are all key elements to me. The one that I would add to this that I think gets missed a lot, especially now, because everybody has as many tracks as they want, is the arrangement. It is very difficult. You could have the best tones and all the best preamps and all the best everything in the world, but if the parts in the music that you're presenting are not arranged in a way where they aren't, you know, colliding with each other, you know, then you can, it's almost impossible. The gear doesn't matter at that point. So I think the arrangement is extremely important. And, you know, some of the greatest recordings that, you know, I seek out and listen to, I would say, you know, a huge part of why they sound so good is because of the way the instrumentation is arranged and being able to slot all these parts into their own places, and it just, everything has its own world that it lives in, and there's so much more separation and detail and stuff, and things aren't sort of wrestling with each other. When things are overlapping and wrestling with each other, it just starts to sound very crowded and small very quickly. So I would say that's hugely important. Definitely, you mentioned performances. I would agree with that. I would say that's probably next on the list for me. If things are not played particularly well, it can be, that can also be a huge problem. But you know, not essential. I think there's a lot of stuff. I'm trying to really sort of average out an opinion here. But yeah, you know, at the end of the day, I think the performances really, they weigh in very, very heavily on this. And I don't know that the specific instruments being used are really that make or break for me. You know, I've had opportunities to use like the most expensive, collectible, amazing, vintage, super duper, whatever things in the universe, and they sound really, really good, but it's not like you can't make a great recording with a Fender Squier, you know, whatever, you know, $200 guitar. Like, I've done that too, you know. And so I don't think, you know, having the most incredible instrument in the world is really that essential. Let's see. I do think microphones are very, very important. So if you're recording the type of music that is capturing sounds in a space with microphones, the mics do matter at a certain point. They can have a huge influence on things. If you're, you know, just using very lo-fi or cheap, dynamic microphones and everything. There's some things that I think would get lost in there that I don't know that you can recover any other way. Preamps, I don't think that will make or break, a recording. Certainly it helps, I'm really into doing these very stylized recordings with these RCA preamps that add a lot of coloration to things, and it's a very specific sound. I love it. It's been very satisfying for me, but it's just one way of doing it. I think there's, and I've definitely had situations. There was a Persephone's Bees record that I did, and there's one song on there called Climbing, and they recorded a demo on that, on this, I don't know, like Tascam 8-track home digital recorder thing, I mean, it's just like not, nothing anywhere approaching professional audio equipment, not even anywhere near it. And I mean, in the era that it was done, these are like cheap, shitty digital converters, all like Class AB cheap, IC-based, audio, analog electronic. Everything in there is the opposite of what people consider to be, the best of the best. And there was something about that recording that was just, it was just so good. We could never beat it with all of my Neve or Undertone or on Fairchilds or whatever I was using at the time. I had all of this amazing tape machines and mics and whatever, and we could never get it better than some of the elements on this thing. And they just captured something that just worked on there. And we added a couple things to it, but I couldn't replace what was there. It was just too good. And so, it was definitely, and then that song, ended up incorporated in a record with stuff that was recorded from scratch with all of my expensive fancy crap, and it sounded perfectly at home with the rest of it. And so it was another round of just proof to me that, like, you don't have to have all of this expensive shit to make great recordings, so I don't know if that was helpful or not. That was a very sort of, I don't know, non-committal response. But yeah, there's things in there that I think are important and things that I think aren't as important. So hopefully that helps. Okay, will you have the blueprints for the Starship Enterprise in your new space, like Barefoot? I have no plans to do that yet. I didn't put up those blueprints for the Starship Enterprise. They were there when I got into that building, and I was so delighted when I found them. I found them after I had actually, purchased the property and was moving in, and discovered this little hidden closet, and was like, oh my God, Star Trek, oh my God. And so I don't have any plans to do that in the new place. But yeah, I don't know, maybe we'll find something else to, to hide in there that'll be fun to discover for the person that takes this over after me. Okay, what's your tracking setup like in the new studio? Are you able to use the Pearsum like a console when tracking it all? Let's see. I'm going to go into this in depth once I'm really settled into this new control room. So it's probably take too long to just talk through it now. But yes, the Pearsum will be a part of that setup. I plan to be monitoring through it, as I'm tracking, and just sort of like the very sort of general description of it is, I'm not going to have a large format console in the new place, and I'm going to essentially create a console or channel strips with normalization in my patch bay. So there'll be preamp, equalizer, compressor, all that normalize in a chain that create a channel strip for me. And then those items will be in racks around me, so I can go and adjust stuff. So that's sort of the very, very sort of generalized response there. But I'm going to get into that in way more detail once I'm in that room and I can kind of explain it all better. Do you still have the J37? I do. I love that tape machine, and it's definitely going to be a part of this new setup. Man, that thing is, it's beautiful sounding. So yeah, it's here. It came with me. Eric, I'd love to hear your approach to recording acoustic guitar with ribbon mics on the new Nickel Creek album. Okay, this is exciting. So I don't know exactly when this comment thing. I'm just going to throw this thing up here as soon as I've finished recording this. But this coming Friday, March 24th, is going to be the release day for the new Nickel Creek album, Celebrants. You can see that on their website. They've announced that on their website. And so on Friday, the 24th, the episode that I put up that evening is going to be me showing the whole recording setup for that record. I took one morning while I was there, and I think I already mentioned this, but I'm going to mention it again. I spent 20 minutes walking around RCA Studio A, showing every single recording setup for Chris and Sarah and Sean and Mike Elizondo playing bass. And then I go into the control room and show the setup in there. So you'll be able to see the whole thing in all its glorious detail on Friday, this Friday. So yeah, you'll be able to check that out. Okay. Oh, and then you specifically mentioned the song Holding Pattern. I have some coil preamps, great choice, and a pair of 4038s. Suggestion on placement, EQ. Thanks so much. Congrats. Okay, so you'll see this in the video, and you know, for the guitar, let's see, I ended up using. I have this new pair of original RCA 77s. That are just unbelievable. Yeah, there's more information about that. These are really, you know, quite a find for me. So you'll see those in this video coming up. The placement, how they're getting placed with the instruments. I talk a lot about the placement for the mandolin. There was a very significant discovery on this most recent record that I was really excited about for miking the mandolin. So you'll see all of that on Friday. So I don't want to spoil it right now, and it'll be cooler to see it than have me just blab on about it. Okay, so then I'd love to hear more about the Helmholtz. Okay, so I already talked about the Helmholtz stuff. And then there's a question about amps with the electroacoustic, with the Strauss monitors. What amps am I using? Right now I have the Strauss set up with a Bryson 4B. I've used Brysons for a very long time. They're just, you know, kind of bulletproof. They're super flat, and have always worked great. And I am very curious about the power amps that Strauss makes. And I've done a little bit of experimentation with trying to A/B power amps. They are difficult to A/B because it's very difficult to instantaneously switch from one power amp to another. And I feel like that is pretty essential to actually get a meaningful comparison between them, especially when I think the differences are as minute as they appear to be with power amps. I don't hear massive life-changing differences with power amps. And so, I mean, for a long time, or let's see, what I have going on? Yeah, I actually have a Bryson in here too. But, you know, I had just like a very cheap, whatever, you know, new like Crown Class D power amp that I was mixing on for a long time in the Topanga place. Sounded fine. I don't know. Didn't have any problem with it. So I'm not super picky about power amps. I don't think they really change the sound that much. At least I haven't experienced that yet. Maybe if there's a way for me to A/B them better in a more meaningful way, then I'll do that. But that is a realm where I think expectation bias has you know, kind of polluted the opinions about that a lot. Because it's very difficult to do blind A/B listening with power amps. So I don't think it gets done very much, and consequently there's a lot of confusion about what's going on with them. I'm a huge proponent of blind A/B testing. So so yeah, I'm sure whatever it is you're using is probably working great. It's not hard to make a power amp that is flat and accurate. It's just, you know, not that hard to do. So I wouldn't worry about it that much. Then there is, I've heard you talk about how fitting a trim pot and a preamp can make unexpected results in consideration to impedance, long cable runs, or both. What would you say is the best method to be able to turn down volume, finished preamp so that the converter is not clipping? Okay, good question. So yes, that is the issue. So if you put a passive attenuator on the output of a mic preamp, unavoidably what ends up happening in order to do that attenuation, the source impedance that ends up getting fed out that cable to some input down the line ends up higher. So you end up with a higher source impedance. Those higher source impedances are more susceptible to degradation from either long cable runs or loading on the other end, depending on what kind of input that you're plugging into. So, there are some problems there, and so I really like being able to pad down the output of a mic preamp, so I can drive that motherfucker, and like you say, not clip digitally going into the computer. It's a really important, useful thing to be able to do. The way we did it on the undertone stuff, and I truly believe this is the best way to do it, is with a transformer that is turning down, a step down transformer on the output. So you can, adjust the ratio so there's like a 10 dB drop on the output. And the cool thing is the issue that gets worse when you're doing it resistively actually gets better when you're doing it with a transformer. When you step down coming out of a transformer, that source impedance actually gets lower, and so the signal getting sent down the line is even less susceptible to degradation. So it's a pretty great way to do it. Maybe, yeah, that might actually be a cool, product idea, is just have a little pass-through thing where you can plug it into it and just engage a 10 dB pad that, actually does it without any chance of, having it interact with things down the road in a bad way. So, but that's how we did it. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a product out there that does that. While it's probably not, wildly difficult to figure out, you would have to find the right transformer and figure out how to, configure it to do that. So, not an easy, not an off-the-shelf solution there. So I'm sorry about that, but I do believe that's the best way to do it. Okay. Love your channel so much that I'm embarrassed. Okay. Okay. That being said, can we please get a video on the tube traps someday? Definitely. That's coming. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to be building more of these frumpin' tube traps. And I'm definitely going to film it. Because all the ones that I have now were built years ago, so I'm going to build a bunch more to this new, as my continuing adventure. I'm going after that last 5 or 10%, and so yeah. That being said, can we please get materials making anything like that? I think they're okay. Yeah, so you're talking about Home Depot concrete tube forms. I'm using the tube forms for Helmholtz resonators, but not tube traps. The tube traps are actually, this fiberglass, like 2-inch thick wall fiberglass tubes. They're used for pipe insulation. And there's a company called Johns Manville that makes them. Okay. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You get the insulation tubes and make whatever length you want. They come in 3-foot sections. I use liquid nails to glue the sections together, put some fabric over it, put end caps on it, done. It's really about as easy as it gets. But soon, I don't know exactly when, maybe in a month or so, I'll have videos up that actually show me building these things. Okay, so here's another question about Trinoff. I already answered that. Okay, not to be that guy, but for recall tweaks especially, wouldn't headphones suffice? Oh man, I really wish they could for me. It would make my life so much easier. And for certain things, I do actually put on headphones for certain parts of the mixing when I'm really like finalizing some stereo placement things and stuff like that, or sometimes for even, you know, fine tweaks on mid and high frequency stuff. They can be useful for that. But man, I cannot get a handle on the low end with headphones. Never figured out how to do it. I'm sure there's people out there that have cracked that code, but I have not. And so I got to feel air moving in the room for some reason to really know what the hell I'm doing with the low end. And for me, ultimately, the low end will determine how much high end I can have. If the low end is really, really, really good, then it's easier for me to have more presence without it being harsh. Everything gets built from the low end up for me. So that's why I don't think the headphones ultimately really work. Okay, then there's a question, was it terrible to work in or was it doable? So this was in reference to this basement setup. And I got to say, it was not great. It was pretty challenging being down there. I would say ultimately more confusing than this room. For whatever reason, that space down there was just really, really bonkers. The low end was very, very difficult to get together down there. So yeah, it wasn't completely impossible, but there was definitely a point down there where I was like, man, I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing in this space. And it was definitely the fault of the the space the acoustic space I was in. Now hearing the Strauss monitors in a room that's really designed to have speakers in it, they are magical. Okay, there's another question. Curious, do you use 32-bit float or 24? Have any opinions on that? Jack Joseph Puig says 96K, 44.1 are more musical sounding than 48. I think in some video you said you use 96. I'm just wondering your opinions about that. Okay. I love anecdotes like this. Jack Joseph Puig, and I love him. I've had times where I've met him and been able to chat with him, and he's obviously done incredible work. Man, he has made some absolutely jaw-dropping records. I love his work. But some of this stuff, like 96K being in 44.1 being more musical sounding than 48K, like I don't know. I would wager that Jack is not doing blind listening tests, making a statement like that. But do I do 32 or 24? I did one round of 32, and it was on Grace's Daylight record. So that was all 32-bit, 96K. And there were things about it that were cool. I didn't really find any dramatic, oh my God, this sounds better type thing. I think there's plenty of dynamic range with 24-bit. I have no problems with that. But it was kind of cool being able to, that it seemingly, when things seemed like they were clipping, I could adjust them after the fact and then have them magically not clipping, which was kind of cool. And so that, I think that is, one of the benefits of that floating whatever bit thing, whatever. I'm not hugely knowledgeable about the digital world of stuff, but my rough understanding is that that contributes to that. That the headroom is all sort of relative instead of there being this fixed, threshold that where you start clipping. So that was kind of cool, and there were times where that was helpful. But yeah, I don't. Again, like there are things in the world of audio that I think really, really have a huge difference on how things sound. Sample rate ain't one of them for me. I've made records at 44.1 or 48 or 88.2 or 96K or whatever. They all sound fine. The other choices that are being made along the way about What drum part to play, where you put the drums in the room, if you mic the drums with one mic or a lot of mics, like all of those things have way, way, way more to do with how your record sounds than what fucking sample rate you use. Yeah, I just, you know, there was a time when I did chase things like that because people would talk about how much of a difference they make, but I just, you know, I just stopped doing it. I'm focusing on the things that, for me, really have a huge tangible difference, you know, right away. And I really want to spend my time, you know, perfecting those realms and not chasing ghosts, you know, for the rest of my life, trying to figure out if one sample rate sounds better than the other. I think that there are better ways that one could, you know, spend their time. Okay, so Eric, totally off topic, but do you notice any weird latency when writing off automation with the fader board? I do, and it's a little bit frustrating. I do at times really like just having a fader that I can push up and down. It's just faster for me than trying to draw in a bunch of crap on the screen. But yeah, if I'm trying to do something really quick with a fader, the way I used to with flying faders, it doesn't quite do that. And maybe it'd work better if it had like an Ethernet connection, but that the little USB, you know, and it's probably USB 2.0 on the fader port, it doesn't seem to have the bandwidth to really be able to respond quickly like that. You know, it wasn't that hard to sort of learn how to anticipate things when I needed to, but yeah, there is definitely latency to it. I did notice that. Okay. So that was all of these recent questions and comments and stuff. Thank you for all of those. I love having this continued conversation going on as I'm kind of like putting out all of this sort of history of this transition, all this stuff that's happened in the last couple years, getting caught up to where I am now. So it's a fun conversation. I'm really enjoying it. Thanks for, you know, engaging in it with me. And I will, the next episode, like I said, is going to be this Friday. We're going to actually get into some music stuff. And so you're going to see the whole recording setup for this new Nickel Creek record. I'm super excited about it. It was such an amazing place, an amazing experience working with them again. And I'm really excited to share it. So I will see you on Friday. All right.